So good morning, everyone. As introduced, my name is Jaykrit. I'll cover Dell Technologies integrated system for Microsoft Azure Stack Hub and how this enables enterprises in Philippines to adopt an in-country based hybrid cloud. So if you look at the vision with Azure Cloud and Azure Stack Hub, is basically to enable Azure services everywhere across the globe. And there are 60 plus Azure hyperscale regions which are announced and already operational today. The expectation here is that there are hundreds of service providers to join in their Azure Stack Hub data centers like the one we are sharing today. It's branded as Go-Cloud by VST ACS, which offers differentiated services to the enterprises. Now, if there are then thousands of enterprises who will still want to adopt Azure model to probably serve the speed on innovation for the need of their businesses, and they don't have leverage of Azure public cloud or Azure Stack Hub in CSP environments, so they can actually deploy in their own data centers. So all coming together with the intent of delivering Azure innovation everywhere. So although today there are so many Azure regions globally, however, when we look at the geographic spread of these, let's say in Southeast Asia, in Philippines, it's clear that there are still major gaps. We don't have any locally hosted Azure public cloud. This is where Azure Stack Hub extends Azure services to the locations where Azure is not or can't go. Now, enterprises often ask, why should I go hybrid cloud? So the three unique cases here, when you look at, apps and services, maybe you are building mobile applications. You probably have some, traditional applications and services that are already hosted in your data centers and running, say, in your own public in private clouds. So hybrid cloud offers a seamless medium to extend these applications as well as the data to the global reach. You can extend it to off-premise clouds or public clouds or vice versa. And then we look at the second use case, which is application developers are building new applications and services, and they just need to write these applications once without changing the framework or the deployment model. They have the ability to deploy these applications consistently, anywhere without making any code changes. And the last but the most important one, the enterprises are able to control their resources securely wherever they are, given the consistent control plane across Azure Stack Hub and Azure Public. So, with GoQloud, which is built on Dell Technologies integrated system for Azure Stack, you have one hybrid cloud for delivering very consistent experience for both traditional applications and cloud native applications. So if you look at from a IT perspective, it's more supporting and hosting traditional applications, and developers are building cloud native applications today. So this is where Azure Stack Hub was specifically, built for cloud in mind, and the apps, services, the tools are all consistent with those in the Azure public cloud. So what's just needed is the familiarity that you have with Microsoft technology from a user or consumer perspective. If you understand how to use the tools on Azure public cloud, you will know how to use Azure Stack Hub as well. So take note that the Azure Stack Hub here is not a different construct, but it's part of one Azure ecosystem with all the identical tools for users and developers and IT operations team, all managed with a consistent experience. And if here we are, like if you have to compare Azure Stack Hub on the left-hand side against Azure's public cloud on the right-hand side, you'll notice that it approaches various layers, like, for example, infrastructure, IaaS or PaaS services, deployment services, such as Azure Resource Manager, and user interface portals or development tools. They are all same. They are all same and consistent with each other. So if you have familiarity of running on one, you can actually run it in hybrid in your GoCloud's data center. So with that, I think the next obvious question is, what services are available on Azure Stack Hub from Azure Public Cloud? It offers today two set of services. One is IaaS, infrastructure as a service, and then platform as a service. If we are to look at IaaS, which is stated in the left-hand side here, and PaaS is mentioned over here on the right-hand side, IaaS services comprise of traditional VMs, like general virtual machines that you are familiar with, Azure t-shirt sizing, but it also extends Azure VM scale sets for, say, scalability and availability, with all automated scalability, baked inside. Docker containers and cloud network or storage services. And when we look at the extending it for modern applications, Azure App Services, Service Fabric, third-party tools like Cloud Foundry, it all can be made available to run cloud-native applications on Azure Stack Hub. And if you really notice that this is behind the firewall, this is not in public Azure. It's very much hosted locally in Philippines. So that's the beauty. So when should you actually use Azure Stack Hub? There are just two use cases of Azure Stack Hub here. First one, I would say when the cloud applications to meet some sort of regulations by government or by industry. And if you can't go to public cloud due to compliance and regulatory reasons, the cloud services comes to your country. You are yet able to develop and deploy these applications with Azure Cloud Framework in mind, but having the full flexibility to deploy on-premise with Azure Stack Hub to just simply meet regulatory or policy requirements. And an example is like, if you think of any application which needs to be today deployed across the region or across the globe, and if you want that application to be consistently the same application and deployed with the same framework and model, how do you do that? Because at times you are not able to use, say, public cloud in certain countries, in certain regions. So for example, if in Philippines, if you have some compliance or regulatory reason for not able to deploy that Azure service which runs on Azure Public, you are able to use Azure Stack Hub today to natively run it. So that is the flexibility to consolidate, not running so many disparate application, but standardizing on one and saving much on the development and maintenance effort from a development point of view. Other use case I would say is the application modernization here. But it's hosted all on premise. So you are modernizing applications from traditional to cloud native, but this is hosting in the data center in Philippines. So with Azure Stack Hub, delivering a core set of modern application architecture on premises, customers can think of modernizing their application portfolio across hybrid cloud environments. The architectures can offer various set of services from PaaS, like Azure App Service, Cloud Foundry as a third party. You can think of developing microservices in Azure Service Fabric. You can think of deploying containers with Windows or Linux Azure containers or AKS service. There is again consistent IaaS services that go beyond traditional VM, which I mentioned, VM scale sets, and continuous Azure innovation. Think of Azure is keep on innovating, bringing new services from a IoT hub, from IoT edge standpoint. So this innovation can continue to come to you rather you thinking or worrying about these innovations and developments. And lastly is the ISV offers. There are so many independent software vendor solutions that are today certified on Azure Marketplace. On Azure Stack has its own marketplace those software can be actually deployed on Azure Stack Hub within the country or within your data centers. Now, one of the biggest challenge of hosting workloads, I would say, the challenges where the biggest challenge is about security and compliances when think of deploying these applications from the scratch. The best part of the Azure Stack Hub with GoQloud is that it's hardened by default, offering the capabilities like data at rest, network encryption, strong authentication mechanisms. Think of securing the operating system baseline, because every industry has their own benchmarks and baselines for securing and protecting the operating system image. There are disabling legacy protocols, disabling unnecessary services. So all those things are already baked into the Azure Stack Hub core framework. And the operating system itself provides a lot of security features in terms of like, anti-malware like Windows Defender, for integrities like device guard and credential guard. So besides this, the compliance paperwork, I would say, is major frustration for most of the enterprises. And how to alleviate, I'm sorry, okay, how to alleviate that? I would say formal assessment with a third party, assessor organization for Azure Stack. What it delivers is as a documentation, as an outcome on how Azure Stack infrastructure meets the applicable controls from several, like, major compliance standards, may it be FedRAMP, may it be PCI DSS. So customers are able to use this like documentation to basically jumpstart the certification process from a compliance and regulation point of view. And here is a brief summary of comparison of Go-Cloud Azure Stack Hub versus a traditional infrastructure. So if you look at traditional infrastructure, how do you procure, build, and operate it? Often there's a large investment cost and capital expenditure. The implementation itself takes time. When you go about scaling and having an agility to orchestrate, to automate, it's all limited, and the operations is very much traditional, and tiring as well. So that is all, I think, being addressed with Azure Stack Hub. There are no upfront investment costs. It comes with a subscription cost. It's much more easy to set up because it's all built and ready to be consumed, just like a public cloud. And the scalability, the agility, the redundancy is all similar to the public cloud offerings. And here the provider like VST ECS is responsible for maintenance and support. So you are just managing your application workloads. And if you even like, you want that managed services, you can actually extend it to VST ECS. Now, once you have deployed, the next set of challenges are how do you really bring in tenants? How do you provision more and more instances? How do you continue to operate from performing software and hardware updates? So there again, is a set of challenges because it's all manual processes. And in Azure Stack Hub, there is an automation baked in again when it comes to software and hardware updates being applied. That makes you risk-free to host your business critical applications on the stack. And as I mentioned earlier, the security and compliance is all taken care with all the global standards like FedRAMP from us, from a federal government's perspective, PCI DSS from a financial industry standpoint. And not just a traditional application, but you can actually extend it to PaaS services for more modern applications. Now, last important point here I would like to mention is with I think with COVID pandemic kind of situation, we today have very limited physical availability, especially in data centers. And at times this may impact your business availability. So how do we actually stay connected without being worried about the applications being available? So here, this is where it extends the capability that you don't have to be physically present to take care of your infrastructure and data centers. It's all through the SLAs and SLOs being offered by VST CSS, in the Go-Cloud offerings. So here is a little bit about the technology, the underlying technology that propels the services and offerings here. It's running on Dell Technologies integrated system. It is purpose built to deliver the scalable, reliable, and consistent infrastructure for Azure Stack software components. And the solution is very much like an engineered approach. It's not like the traditional servers that you actually buy from a hardware vendor or Dell in that case. It is deployed completely as an appliance, means it comes as rack stack, cable configured, pretty much ready to deploy, and the deployment is again automated. The extension from an operation standpoint, patch and update is all automated as well. So throughout the life cycle, it's completely built with an engineering mindset. And from an architecture point of view, if you look at this system is completely built on hyper-converged infrastructure with Microsoft software-defined capabilities in the background, on top of it as a software. We have also tightly integrated, as I mentioned, the engineering approach to build additional Azure Stack offering from Dell Technologies as well as from ISVs through Azure Stack Hub marketplace. And the configuration, the hardware configuration are very much designed specifically for Azure-based, workloads in mind. So there is a stringent engineering approach here, which is taken to both initial design as well as ongoing sustainability to offer you, the upgrades in near term or future. And here is the quick differentiators of GoCloud. Foremost, unlike public cloud data centers, this is very much hosted in Philippines and operated locally. This delivers, lowest latency or lower latency. If you are to look at accessing public cloud outside the country, there is no egress cost as well, and it addresses some sovereignty and regulation requirements if you have. So you have completely like an option of face-to-face interaction with VST ECS, such as like for POCs or demos, even before like procuring the service, or even for post-sale support. So you go with pay-as-you-go, managed service billing here, and look at the VST ECS data center as well. For both Azure Stack infrastructure, it's compliant with global standards. It's TIA 942, as rated 2 data center, and with formal assessment from third-party assessor, the Azure Stack Hub infrastructure is completely compliant. So these are some of the major differentiators that GoCloud offers you today in country. And with that, I think that was my last slide. I hope this session offered you some quick understanding about GoCloud Azure Stack Hub offering, which is powered by Dell Technologies integrated system. In case if you have any queries, please feel free to reach out to the VST ECS team. And I do have my contact details provided here. Please feel free to save it using the QR code. So thank you very much and good day ahead.